In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Hello everyone, dear friends. After the introduction in the previous session about the 3D Vista software and creating virtual tours, it was decided that in this session we would explain each component of this software in detail, one by one, and teach you how to work with it so that in the end you can create a good virtual tour. The first thing you need to know about this software is what kind of computer you need so that it can easily handle the software and you can work with it comfortably. According to the 3D Vista website, the minimum amount of RAM your computer or system should have to easily run this software is 8 GB. Of course, the developers of this software actually recommend 16 GB of RAM, and even if your system has more than 16 GB, it can still easily run this software. Regarding the system processor, and at a minimum it should be an Intel Core i5 or its equivalent in AMD, which would be a Ryzen 5. More powerful processors such as a Core i7 are recommended, and anything above that is certainly even better for working with this software. It is recommended that the hard drive from which this software retrieves data should preferably be an SSD. As I mentioned in previous sessions, if it is not an SSD and instead is an HDD, sometimes loading files can take a long time. And if you happen to have a particularly large and extensive project with a considerable number of panoramic photos, it is quite possible that sometimes it may even take several hours, perhaps even many hours, just for the entire project to fully load and subsequently open completely. Therefore, it is recommended that the computer be equipped with RAM or an SSD hard drive. The minimum operating system that can handle this software is Windows 7, but Windows 10 or higher is recommended, and all of these versions must be the 64-bit edition. You can see that a graphics card or graphical power is not recommended for this software, so your system may or may not have a graphics card. It doesn't really matter when working with this software. Alright. Next, let's move on to introducing the software. As we mentioned, after we open the software, an update page appears, but we do not accept the updates. We click on the new option, and then it shows your previous projects and also allows you to create a new project from this section. By clicking in this section, I create a new project, and then it asks you to choose your preferred template. It has a list of pre-made templates here, but for now we don't want to work with any of them. We select the basic empty template without any color and enter the software. We don't want to create a panorama because we've already made our own panorama. With the software and equipment that I introduced in previous sessions in detail, now we just want to import those panoramas we created, bring them into the software and work with them. Regarding importing panoramas, first I need to mention a point which I have talked about in previous sessions as well, but here I will show you how it works, and then God willing we'll continue import the panoramas and work with them. Right now I just want to import a test panorama here to explain something. Here you go. I click on the import panorama option and select the standard panorama. I will now go to the specific folder where I have carefully saved all of my panoramas, and allow me to thoughtfully select one of those original high quality panoramas and then gently open it here so that I can precisely point out this important detail. Take a look. As soon as I tried to import the panorama, a warning appeared here saying that your photo or panorama contains metadata and the software wants to extract gyroscope or inclinometer information from that metadata and use it. As I mentioned, sometimes when we're taking photos, we place the tripod in an unsuitable spot and our camera ends up tilted, so the 360-degree panorama we capture is also tilted. Inside 360-degree cameras, there are gyroscopes. There are inclinometers that measure the degree of tilt and record it in the photo's metadata. Now, this software wants to read that gyroscope information from the photo, and if your photo is tilted, it will automatically level it for you. If you select yes, it will use that metadata and level the photo. If you select no, it will ignore that metadata and use the photo as it was taken. If you have selected a large number of panoramas at once and want to import them all together, To prevent this warning message from appearing for each panorama, you can check this box to apply it. Your selection will then be applied to all those panoramas, and settings will be used for all of them. I click on the yes option and see that my panorama is imported into the software like this. All right, I don't need to do anything with this panorama. Now I'll go back and select all my panoramas again, the edited versions, and I'll choose the versions that are ready to use. I select the first one, I hold down the shift key on the keyboard, I select the last one, they all get selected, I open them. The panoramas are loaded into the software one after another. This process takes some time, and the power, speed, and type of your computer's hard drive play a significant role in the processing power and performance speed of this software. A good system can save you a lot of time, but if your system is weak, it can waste a lot of your time. In fact, on weaker systems, sometimes the workflow is so slow that projects are no longer economically viable, considering the amount of time spent on them. So try to make sure that the system you choose meets at least the minimum requirements. Alright, we've imported the panoramas here like this. Please note, everyone, that the Publish tab in this section is the first and last tab we'll be working with. After we've imported the panoramas, in the Publish tab we can rearrange them. For example, I want panorama number 3 to be displayed first. Now I've named them 1, 2, and 3, but after I import them, I decide that I want panorama number 3 to be shown first, and I want to change their order to 3, 2, 1. In the Publish tab, I can change the position of these panoramas like this by dragging and dropping. As you can see, this way I can change the order of the panoramas, or if I change my mind, I can revert their order like this. After that, in the project name section, I come and choose the name of the project. Based on the type of project and the way we took the photos, we choose a name for it. And keep in mind that this name will be displayed at the top of the project link. When you upload this project to the website and want to share its link with others, when you copy and paste the link on social media, when you send it, this project name and description will be shown at the top of that link, and people will be able to see this name. Also, when you view this project in your internet browser, the project name will be displayed at the top of your browser tab. So I'm going to define a name for this project, 3D Vista Education. For the description, let's say lesson 1. And for the author, let's put Fisheyes, IR. In the same way, there are other settings here as well, but for now I don't want to go into them. God willing, when I get to the Publish tab, I'll explain the rest of the settings too. These few settings are important because you need to define and specify them at the beginning of your project. Next, I'll go into the Panorama tab. I've imported the panoramas. I can view their list here one by one. Notice that when we enter the Panorama tab, another list, another menu appears down here, which allows us to make various settings for the panoramas. Basically, we can work with our photos as 360-degree images, and I'll mention their names in a moment. There's a list. The first one shows all the panoramas here for us. We can sort them based on their names or according to the playlist we've created ourselves. In this section, we can search. For example, only 01 is displayed. Only 02 is displayed. In this way, we can search for panoramas. If we enable this tag option, the panorama tags will also be shown. What is a panorama tag? We can define a tag for each panorama if we want to categorize or classify our panoramas. For example, we want certain places to not be visible to some people. For example, we might want to separate a virtual tour into male and female sections, or we might want to make it accessible to foreigners versus Iranians, or to external versus internal users. There might be some panoramas that, for instance, we don't want foreigners to see, and there are some that we don't want Iranians to see. So we define tags for the panoramas. For example, let me select the first panorama. In this section, I enter the tag N and add this tag. For the second panorama, here I enter the tag FA, meaning, for example, Persian. Okay, for the third one, now based on those two tags I defined earlier, I'll select one of them. So when this tag option is active, I can view the tags of the panorama. What is it used for? Well, I want only the N tag to be visible to foreigners and only the red or Persian tags to be visible to Iranians. I design a hotspot, an icon or a button, so that by pressing that button, the EN tags will be hidden. The FA tags or Persian tags or the red tags will actually be shown, displayed, and vice versa. I design another button that will show the N tags. It will hide the FR and FA tags, which we'll cover later, God willing. It's just that here, since there's an option to enable or disable the tags, I wanted to mention these points. At your service, I'll come here and remove these tags from this panorama as well. So for now, we'll have the panoramas without any tags. Now, pay attention, whichever panorama I select, in this section, I can make some adjustments to that panorama. These are general settings that can be applied to each individual panorama. All right. If you want to apply a set of general settings to all panoramas, you can select all of them at the same time. And then go ahead and make those adjustments. What does that mean? All right, let me first explain the specific settings, and then at the end, I'll go over the general settings for you. For panorama 1, I want to set some specific settings. I select this panorama. I come to this column and make these adjustments. We'll go through these one by one. The first option, which is actually our source image, if you decide to change the source of this panorama, you can easily go here and select another image instead. Sometimes you might want to update a virtual tour. For example, you come to this section because you took this photo a year ago. Now today you want to update this photo and replace it with a new one. But you don't want the hotspots, settings, or any of the other data you worked on to change. You just come to this section, select the panorama from the list, and from here you update your new photo and replace the previous one. The rest of the sections remain untouched and stay as they are. The next option is include in the playlist. Okay, let me preview this panorama one so you can see it. By playlist, it means that these will play automatically. When you create this virtual tour and then play it, the photos will automatically play one after another and be displayed. With the preview option, I can see the panoramas I've added up to this point. We click on the preview button so that after the individual tiles of these panoramic images are meticulously created, our comprehensive virtual tour will be properly displayed, and we can then clearly see how everything we've diligently done so far truly looks and functions. It is shown in 3D Star's own viewer. You can see that the image is rotating automatically. With an inertia it starts off slow, then speeds up a bit, and the image keeps rotating until it completes a full turn, after which it moves on and the next image is played. Let's wait a bit for it to complete a full rotation so we can see how it transitions. It moves on to the next image. It commences its rotation from a specific starting point, gracefully returning to precisely the same spot, then pauses momentarily and subsequently proceeds to the presentation of the second image. Now it stops and moves on to the second image. In this way it rotates again on this image, and so on each image is played one by one. Now we want one of these panoramas not to be included in our playlist. For example, we don't want the second panorama to be there, so we come here and uncheck this box. We uncheck include in playlists so that it gets excluded from our playlist. Alright, let's go back to panorama 1 and continue with the settings. Stop global music when it plays. If I check this box, the music that I have set globally and generally for this virtual tour will stop. We assign that music from the publish section. A general music track will play for our virtual tour when we move from one scene to another, from one photo to another. That music will continue playing in the background. If we want to have a separate video or music in a panorama, we activate this checkbox so that as soon as that panorama appears, the background music stops and the specific music intended for that panorama starts playing. For example, in a club where we want to showcase its different halls, when we are showing the lobby areas, we can play some light music, and when we want to show the gym hall, we can play techno music. In this way, with this option, we can play different music tracks in different sections. Alright, the next option is the panorama title, where we can choose a name for it. Here, the title is actually initially taken from the file name of the image. Now, here we can change its name. The file name will still remain the same, but we can give it a new name, which I will do now. Panorama 01. In this way, we can also define a subtitle for it, but I usually don't do this. It's not necessary. Thumbnail. You see, sometimes in a virtual tour, for example, when you want to show the list of panoramas, you don't need the full panorama itself. There, the thumbnail is shown, or as they say, the fingernail version is displayed. We can choose a different image as the thumbnail. For example, I want the thumbnail of this panorama to be a different picture, so I go to the desktop. I want the thumbnail of this panorama to be this picture. Notice that the panoramic view itself remains firmly in its original place, but its corresponding thumbnail image has significantly changed and now appears precisely like this. It would be considerably better if I were to return it to its initial original state. Let its own image be the thumbnail. Thumbnail is actually a smaller version of the real image that the software creates to display the panorama with that picture in different sections. The next option is the horizontal field of view, which we usually don't work with because our images are 360 degrees. Our field of view is also 360 degrees. If we had 180 degree images, we could change this value to view 180 degree images. So we don't touch this section and don't work with it. Be careful, if you change it too much, the software will get confused and you'll have to close the project completely and start over from scratch. So make sure not to mess with this part too much. The next option is rotation speed. There are two modes, manual and automatic. And the next option is zoom speed, which also has manual and automatic modes. The next options are rotation speed and zoom speed. The following options are rotation speed and zoom speed, each of which has two modes, manual and automatic. First, let me explain rotation speed. In manual mode, you can see that a high speed has been set for it. By default, the software sets it to 90, and it doesn't really matter much to us whether we increase or decrease it. What is manual mode? It's the mode where we use the mouse to view this virtual zoom like this. We rotate it with the mouse, right? But the automatic mode is when we want to rotate it using the keyboard buttons. With the left and right arrow keys, we can rotate this panorama. Now, if I increase this manual, automatic setting it was set to 3 by default. If I increase this, watch how it changes. You see, the rotation speed becomes very high and it's practically not suitable for our work. So we try to keep it at its default value. It remains. For zooming, similarly in manual mode, we actually use the mouse wheel to zoom, and the software's default is set to 13. Depending on the quality of the panorama, we can change this value. If you can zoom in a lot on the panorama, it means the panorama is very high quality. It's better to increase the manual speed up to around 50, but if not, if our panorama isn't of very good quality, it's better to leave it at the default value. In automatic mode as well, you can use the A and Z keys like this. Notice that first I zoom in with the mouse and then exit the zoom. Then I zoom in with the A key and exit the zoom. So this is for when the values are 13 and 10. Now I'll set this 13 to 50 and this 10 to 50 as well. Let's see how much of a difference it makes. First, I'll zoom in manually. You saw how much the zoom speed increased. Now with the A and Z keys, you saw that the zoom speed increased. So with this as well, you can control the zoom speed of your virtual tour. The next option is an export setting. Here you can control the output quality of the panorama photos you've created. It shows you the image size here. The photo we took, you can lower the quality of the output image that's being generated by enabling this button so that your tour will load faster on the internet. But I personally usually prefer to keep the quality at 100% because in 360-degree photography, quality is generally important because the photos are actually placed in a spherical space and usually their quality is generally low and is different from a regular photo you might take with, say, a 5-megapixel camera. Its quality might be much better than a 30-megapixel camera. You want to take a 360-degree photo because those 30 megapixels in a 360-degree photo are spread across the entire space. However, with the 5-megapixel camera, the pixels are actually concentrated in a small rectangular area, so the quality will be much higher. In this section, you can also assign tags to your panorama. And next is the panorama action section. You can define a series of actions and functions for your panorama. That is, when your panorama appears, here you can specify what it should do. When this panorama appears, it can go to the next panorama or open an image album. And there are about 23 actions here that you can choose from to be performed when this panorama opens. But usually this option isn't used much and actions are more commonly applied elsewhere, like in the skins or hotspots, which we will definitely go over together later. Let me close this so my workspace doesn't get cluttered. The next option is the zoom settings, which have two modes, initial and minimum. Look, the minimum mode is like this. It means when you zoom back, your field of view increases. The initial mode is the zoom level that the panorama has when you first enter it, which by default in the software is set to 105 and 130. We'll keep these two values as they are and you can adjust them using this slider. In this section you can also select the initial point. That is, the initial point means that when my panorama opens for the first time, it starts from here. We rotate it to the spot where we want our panorama to start. While holding the panorama in that position, we press this set view button for the initial point, like this. And now, when I preview it in this window, it will actually be shown in this section, right at the beginning of the display. Did you see that? All right, let me close this section as well. The next part is the autoplay setting. As you notice, when I previewed it, it automatically starts rotating slowly, then speeds up with some inertia, then slows down again, gradually stops, and then moves on to the next panorama. Or maybe you don't want your panorama to rotate at all when it's displayed. To do this, you can simply uncheck this option and your panorama will no longer autoplay. But if you want to check this option and would like your virtual tour to have autoplay, then a set of settings will become available that you can adjust. The first option is lapse, which basically determines how many times the panorama will be shown. It will rotate once. It can rotate twice, 3 times, or several times on its own, and automatically show the environment to the viewer. And here we can change that 1, 2, 3, and so on. Of course, we can also set it based on time. That means, for example, we can set this panorama to rotate for, say, 20 seconds or 10 seconds, depending on the speed and other features we've defined for it. Based on your personal preference, you can choose this setting as you like. I'm going to choose that very same option and then set its value to precisely 1. All right, the next setting is right and left. If you select left, it will start rotating to the left during autoplay, and if you select right, it will rotate to the right. There's also the rotation speed, which you can increase or decrease as you wish. I'll increase it so you can see its effect. Next is inertia, which basically means that when the panorama is displayed, it starts moving slowly at first, then reaches a certain point, and after that it rotates at a constant speed. At the end, the rotation gradually slows down and stops. So I'll also increase the inertia value so you can better notice this effect. Of course, I could completely disable it so that It rotates at the initial speed right from the start, but usually it's better to keep it enabled. The next option is don't allow interaction. If I check this option, your panorama will play completely in autoplay mode, and the user won't be able to interact with it. They won't be able to interfere, rotate it around, or look at the environment. So make sure to leave this option unchecked. The next option is continue post automatically if user doesn't interact for. Look, if I check this, it means that if the user doesn't do anything for say 5 seconds, it will automatically continue the path in autoplay mode. So for example, your user rotates and looks around, then stops and does nothing in this state. If we've checked this option, set the seconds to 5, after 5 seconds again, it will start rotating. However, the rotation is such that if the user is in this state, after autoplay starts, your panorama tour will rotate like this. Well, if we don't want this to happen, and we want it to return upward again before starting the automatic rotation, all we need to do is check this option. Move view to the horizon means bring the view up to the horizon and then start playing. Alright, I'll set this. I'll do a 2-second preview. So as you can see, since I increased the speed, it's rotating quickly, and now I'll slow it down a bit and bring it up. Let's see what happens after 2 seconds. See, it returned to the horizon again and continues its rotation. So these were all the settings we chose for a panorama, which were also available in the list section. These were also available here on the side in the settings section. However, we can only adjust these settings for each individual panorama in the settings section. If we want to apply some of these general settings to all of them, for example, if we don't want any of the panoramas to play automatically, we go to the list and select the first one. We hold down the shift key and select the last one as well. This way we select all of our panoramas. We can apply the settings shown here to all of them. We can uncheck the autoplay option. We can set the zoom setting to be the same for all of them. We can actually select the tags for all of them as well. Or for example, I want only 1 and 2 to have a specific tab, and then if there are 3 and 4, they can have other tabs. In this way we can apply the settings. Note that Ctrl+A doesn't work here, and we have to select the list using the method of holding down Shift and selecting the last item. We can set the export quality settings for all of them, as well as the other settings I mentioned earlier. Now let's move on to the next tab, which is the Hotspot tab. Hotspot is one of the important tabs in this software, and you'll be working with it a lot. In older versions of 3D Vista, working with Hotspot was a bit complicated and difficult. It required a lot of imagination and took a lot of time, but now it's become much easier. In previous versions, the panorama image was displayed here in a white format. That is, it wasn't displayed in this unfolded 3D format, and we had to visually zoom in on those hotspots and place them at the point we wanted, and then switch to 3D mode to preview it. We would check to see if its position was correct and whether its size was right or not. Then if it wasn't okay, we would go back into the software and make changes. But now things have gotten much better, and working with the software is a lot easier. So what is a hotspot? Hotspots are icons that we place inside our virtual tour, and when you click on them, a series of actions are performed. For example, it takes you to the next panoramic photo. In other words, the simplest thing you can do is place an icon here so that when you click it, you enter the panorama taken from this spot. There are various things you can do with these hotspots, like changing the tour's language, or having a video pop-up appear here, or a picture pop-up appears here, or a web page opens here. In fact, all the actions available in the screen section of panoramas can also be applied to hotspots. We can set it up so that some hotspots are hidden or shown in certain sections and so on. And now we're going to work with the simplest option. We want to go from this panorama to another panorama. We want to go from panorama number 1 to panorama number 2. All you need to do is go to the panorama section, enter the hotspot menu, click on panorama number 1 like this, then drag panorama number 2 and drop it onto the area where you want to move or navigate to. This way, after you do this, a box like this will appear here with an option on the left side. Create return hotspot asks if you want to create a return hotspot in panorama number 2. In other words, it means that when you click from panorama 1 to go to panorama 2, do you also want to be able to click in panorama 2 to return to panorama 1? By checking or unchecking this box, we can do this. And now we can choose and set what the hotspot looks like and what color it is in this section. Here you can see a long list of hotspots, which you can also categorize. For example, you can choose to display only cows in panoramas, or only animations, or just those that are specifically for the floor. Okay, I'll activate the animation and enable the cow in the floor panorama so I can select a suitable icon for this purpose. I select this icon and click on the select option. Note that if you don't see these initial icons in your own software, it's because I created them myself. I made the PNG file and then imported it into the software and saved it in its library. I select animated, go to floor, and this one that's readily available. In this way, after I selected that panorama, it moved on. Now it asks me to specify the return position as well. Well, know that in older versions it was like this, and we used to select the hotspots with the plus sign in this way. You can see that it's a bit difficult. I think it was about here. Our panorama number 1. Now let's add it. Go and take a look. We can also make its size a bit bigger if we think it's too small. Let's go to preview and see what we've made. Okay, I click on panorama number 1 and enter panorama number 2. Again, I click on this. I go back. Panorama number 1 is pretty much at an acceptable level. I do the same thing for panorama number 3. I go into panorama number 2 and drag panorama number 3, which is roughly here, over to here. This time the job is easier. The previous icon I used has appeared here and it suggested it automatically, so I'll just select this, and I also select its return position, which was roughly here. Like this. It's a bit small. I'll go here as well. I'll make it a bit bigger, and that's it. We were easily able to define icons that allow us to move from one panorama to another, but in the hotspot section we can do other things as well. When we open the hotspot tab, in this section it provides us with about 5 other options where we can make changes. The first one is Polygon, which allows me to draw a polygon or multi-sided shape here using this tool. If you want to create a kind of curtain in a certain area, for example, if you want a part not to be visible, for instance, you want these windows from here to here not to be visible, you forgot to edit this out in Photoshop before, and now you want this window not to be visible. You can throw a curtain like this over it. You can remove its border. You can change the color of the curtain. You can even adjust its opacity or transparency so that what's behind it is either completely hidden or slightly visible. In this way, you can do various things. Well, in previous versions, these features didn't exist. Of course, it did exist, but you couldn't use it like this. Keep in mind that for this polygon you brought in, you can select a tag. I already explained what the purpose of a tag is, right? We apply a property to a set of elements. Basically, we label them the AB label. We choose a name for those labels. And later, for example, we might want to press a button. Some of the labels get removed. They won't be shown, they'll be hidden, or maybe want to press a button so that some other labels are displayed. You can do this using tags. With tags, you define your labels, and then you can easily assign an action to a button or option, telling it to perform an action. For example, hide a specific tag. This process is simple. For instance, if you want to create a virtual tour to change the language, being bilingual is very useful, and it can actually hide certain hotspots or texts and display other texts instead. Now in this section, in the text section, let me explain that to you. The next option is the text option. Look, you simply click, you then carefully select the desired text. You click on your panorama. A dedicated space will open up for you, providing an excellent opportunity to to compose and write some meaningful content here. For now, I will simply proceed to write the single word text within this designated area. For this part, I need to come into this box, and my language was Persian. Okay, I wrote it like this, text, and well, it has various settings. I apologize. In the polygon section, I forgot to mention the action tag. You can also assign a series of actions to this polygon so that when you click on it, certain tasks are performed for you. In fact, the same list of actions appears again, but now there are more options. And the software can carry out these tasks for you when you click on this polygon. The next option is the properties of this hotspot, which you want to configure. If we check visible on rollover, it means that when we roll over it, meaning when the mouse hovers over it, or on a smartphone, when we rotate towards it, it will be displayed and become visible if this option is checked. If the lower option, visible only in VR mode, is checked, then we can only see this polygon when we are viewing it through a virtual reality camera. The next option is use hand cursor. If we uncheck this, when the mouse hovers over this polygon, the cursor will remain in its default shape. But if this option is checked, when the mouse hovers over the polygon, it will change to a hand cursor, indicating it's clickable. Let me show you how it looks. Now the option is checked, and when I hover over this polygon, you can see the cursor turns into a clicking hand. If I uncheck that option, the mouse cursor won't change anymore. Look, when I move the mouse over the polygon, it keeps its original default shape. The next option is invert. Look, we've applied some properties to this curtain. For example, let's go to the properties section here and increase its opacity so it becomes visible. Now we want to invert this property, meaning this part won't have that property, while the rest of our entire tour, our whole panorama, will have that property. If we click on invert, you can see that the rest of your tour has that property and only this part is transparent. This is how you see it. It's rare that we actually use this feature, but in any case, it's an option that's been included in the software. The next option is exclude from click and go mode. There's a mode in the publish tab, which I'll explain when we get to that, a tab that is defined for hotspots. Basically, if we activate this mode, the hotspots will be hidden and we can only move around the virtual tour by clicking the mouse. So first we define the hotspots, and then an area of effect is set for each hotspot. With the click and go option, let me go to the publish tab and show you. In the navigation settings section, there's an option called use click and go mode. If this is checked, let me preview it. Look, my hotspot switch, I had removed this crotier. This is the designated hotspot. Okay, I removed its invert. Why? Let's watch this in a browser and see. Maybe it displays correctly in the browser. Actually, if you want to in the browser, no, it doesn't display correctly there either. What if I just delete this polygon altogether? And now, okay, to view it in the browser, all I need to do is hold down the shift key and click this preview option. At that point, it will be displayed in my default browser. So as you can see, the hotspots I had set up to move from section 1 to panorama 2 has been removed, and instead a circle like this has been created along with an interactive area for it. Now if I click here, nothing happens, but if I click over here, you see that it moves on to the next panorama. We'll explain all of this in detail later, so you'll be able to adjust the settings to change the color of those circles or even make them invisible. Alright, let's go back to our text. I want to make another copy of this same text. All I need to do is select it, press Ctrl+C and then Ctrl+V, and it creates another text for me. Exactly the same size as the previous text. Now, I want to change this text to Persian. So I'll write text, and I can come and change its font. For example, the font, I can set it to be Yekan, a font commonly used in websites, and change its size. I can make it bold, align it right or left, and now I want to center it. And now I can apply other settings to it, like changing its color and so on, but I don't want to go into too much detail in this section. Most of you already know, and it's enough to just work with it a bit to understand how you can adjust the settings. I want you to clearly see here, I want to specifically show you the practical use of various tags, right? Within this particular video, in this very section, within the dedicated tag section, I meticulously assign a specific tag n to the very first text element. This demonstrates a fundamental aspect of content organization and categorization. Sorry, I need to do this part because it's in Persian, it doesn't type. Okay, so like this, I select a tag for it, and for the next text, I choose the fa tag, meaning Persian. So then I come and hide my Persian text, but I want my English text to be shown. I come here and also add a polygon just like this. Very simply, we define an action for this polygon as well. Add action, hide, show, hotspot, good, unclick. That means when this polygon is clicked, show the Persian tags, and at the same time, the next action, unclick, hide the English tags. This will allow for a clear distinction between the two language sets, providing a more organized and user-friendly experience. Alright, let's preview it. Now, if I click on this polygon, my English text should disappear and the Persian text should appear. Did you see that? So you were able to somewhat understand the use of tags and see how you can use them. Let me see if there are any important settings left. Otherwise, I'll move on. I'll go to the next option. I'll explain this part in the picture. You can understand the transform settings better there. I can also import some images into the Panorama. Well, before, when the hotspot was displayed in wide mode, it was really difficult to do this in the Vista software. If we wanted to import an image, we had to go and do it in software like Photoshop, sticking the image onto the Panorama so that we could actually make the image three-dimensional and adjust its tilt to fit this space. Look, here we can see the image, this window, we can view it in perspective. If you import a regular image here as a square, it definitely won't give you that three-dimensional feeling anymore. But thankfully, in the newer versions, this issue has been fixed and it's displayed in 3D. So any image you import can easily be shown in 3 dimensions. Now I go to this section and click on the new element option. I'm going to select an image to import into the tour. As you can clearly see, you can easily resize your visual image like this and precisely place it inside the virtual tour according to its specific position. The rest of the settings, like the action tag and hotspot properties, are just like the other hotspots, so I'll skip those and move on to the transfer settings section. If the first option, tri-axis mode, is checked, when I change one of these corners, I can see that the other dimensions change proportionally as well. But in this section, we can also control these changes using numbers. And also we can set some other features like fit inside, middle, center, and so on for our image. But if I select the free option, none of those are selectable anymore. However, I can move and adjust each corner of this image individually. Now, I want to fit this image to this section. I want to give my virtual tour a more realistic look, as if this image, this logo had already been installed here. There we go. Let's now proceed to the preview section to take a closer look at what we have created. As you can see, I managed to place this logo here so realistically, and it even has that 3D effect. Now I can set this option to toggle mode so it works for me in both states. Let me check if this actually happens or not here in the action section. For show, this particular element is the one we are focusing on and observing. I will also proceed to toggle this specific setting for hide as well, ensuring a complete demonstration of both functionalities. I think this should work. Let's check it out. So the one that was hidden will be shown, and the one that was visible will be hidden, just like this. Yes. And every time you click, it toggles, its state changes. The one that's being displayed gets hidden. The one that was hidden gets displayed. All right, let's go back into the software. All of these things we did for actually importing the image. We can do the same thing with videos as well. If I select this video option, I can import a video in various formats previously. We could only import MP4. Now we can import MP4, OGG, MKV, WMV, and other formats here as well. We import the video into the tour. Just like with photos, we can apply a series of settings to it, but I won't go into that now. The same settings that were available for the other icons can also be applied to videos. The next option is the web frame. Suppose we want to display a website in a part of our tour, for example, on this wall. So we carefully select the web frame, which is a crucial initial step, and then we can bring it into a highly versatile free mode. This allows us to precisely adjust its various corners, shaping it meticulously like this to effectively give us a much better and more immersive 3D feel. Following these adjustments, we then proceed to navigate to this specific part of the properties panel. Here, we enter the URL or link of the website that is supposed to be displayed. For example, Fish Eyes IR. Now, if I preview this, it won't be displayed. The reason is that I'm actually previewing this on my computer using localhost. Well, on my localhost, this address can be my website's address. Look, if I open it in the browser, you'll see localhost 8888 all the way to the end. It's being served at this address. Or even if we try to view the website in the viewer itself, it won't load because the viewer itself is also actually running on localhost. But if we export this tour, publish it, and put it on the internet, the website will definitely be displayed here. All right, that wraps up the topic of hotspots. The next tab is Autopilot, which we'll go into so I can explain it. The details that it contains. Autopilot is for situations where we want to show certain parts of the virtual tour without any user interaction, without anyone interfering. It's actually very simple. I just click on this spot. I want to show. This point is the initial view that we previously set for our tour. We want it to start here, look at this spot first, then go look at the ceiling, then come down to look at the floor, and then go check out this corner. So it rotates and moves from the starting point. First it starts at 0, then it rotates to 1, 2, and 3. As you can see, it has a set of settings. For each of these, we select the desired mode and can apply these settings to it. First of all, we can control the movement speed. We can choose whether the path it takes is the shortest or in fact the longest route, meaning whether it goes from 0 to 3 first or from 0 to 1. We can set the duration or the movement speed or the duration for it. We can choose one of these for it. How should our type of inertia be? Should it be cubic, linear, quartic, or any of the various modes we can choose? For now, I set it to cubic. In the same way, I can apply these settings for the two states 1, 2, and 3. I'm just going to increase its speed so you can see how the autopilot works. For one of them, I'll actually set the inertia effect to linear and preview it so we can see how it looks. Take a look. And that's the topic of Autopilot. I forgot to mention this part. We can control the number of repetitions here. How many times this autopilot will repeat. If we check the next option, it says don't allow interaction, meaning the user won't be able to interfere and the autopilot must play. The next option is continue path automatically. I've already explained these exactly before. It says to continue the path. If the user does not perform any action or interaction for a period of 2 full seconds, then you will be able to clearly see and review all the remaining and available settings and configurations. Let me see if there's anything left that we haven't mentioned. If I proceed to enable the add zoom animation feature and then subsequently increase its playback speed to a higher setting in order to thoroughly observe and analyze its intended visual effect, and then further increase the zoom level significantly to precisely determine how it should ideally zoom in on the specific wire point 3 located here. Well, despite these careful adjustments and my close observation, I regrettably did not really notice any discernible or significant effect from this particular zoom animation. Consequently, I will now proceed to reduce the zoom level back down to a lower setting to carefully observe and understand what exactly happens or changes under those conditions. Maybe if we enable this on wire point number 3 or maybe even on 2, it will show us better. Yes, as we indeed just saw. It actually worked in reverse. On wire point 3, when we reduced the zoom, it zoomed in more, and on wire point 2, when we increased it, it actually zoomed out. So as you saw, you can also set up Autopilot for your tour, but as I said, these aren't used much. They're mostly for certain special virtual tours, usually for e-learning or distance learning. The next option is the audio option. With this option, you can add music to your panorama or even set directional music. That means when you're looking at one direction in the panorama, a certain music plays, and when you look in another direction, a different music plays. Alright, I'll go to the Add Audio File section and select an audio file. Randomly, and when I precisely click on a specific point within the designated area, if I carefully check the directional option, I can then accurately and clearly specify that particular area with greater precision and control. This way, I want one particular song to play exclusively on one half of my stereo panorama and a completely different song to play on the other distinct half. This allows for a clear separation of the audio elements. Just like this. Let's now go to the preview so that you can clearly see how it actually works. It takes a little while to convert this. Alright, let me interact with it myself so you understand better, since it was on autopilot. Okay, imagine that this part is playing one piece of music. You slowly rotate. In this part, a different song is playing. Just like that. Alright, there aren't any other special settings here either. There's the music quality, which you usually set lower so that the size of the music file being played doesn't get too large, and overall your tour size doesn't increase too much, and it loads quickly. If you enable play as loop, as soon as the song ends, it will start again from the beginning. But if you don't enable this, once the song ends, nothing else will play. The next option is the enhance option, which is a very important and useful feature. If you still need to adjust the lighting of your panorama, or change its contrast, or modify the color saturation, in this section you can make a number of adjustments. I'll apply some exaggerated settings so you can see how this part works. Let's go ahead and take a look to see what adjustments we were able to make. Of course, first it needs to render and regenerate the tiles before showing the result. It will take some time. If you don't like the result, you can click the reset option to return everything to its original state. Alright, the next tab in the settings section is Panorama effects, which currently offers us 2 effects in this version. The first one lets you add a light ray effect. You just click on the add option. Wherever you have intense light, you can actually apply it like this. In these 2 sections you can adjust the distance, and you can also increase or decrease the opacity. I'll increase it a bit so you can see it more clearly. Let's see what we mean by the light effect. Alright, look here. We have a light source. When we turn towards it, the effect of the light on the lens. Let me remove this music because it's preventing you from hearing my voice. Now, let me go back to FX and preview. Okay. In this part, as you can see, I've placed 2 light rays, one here and one in this section. As soon as I turn towards it, look, these hexagonal light shapes appear, and in fact you can see it's a kind of effect. It's as if there's a strong light here. When the camera turns towards it, this intense brightness is created, and it's used for scenes where there's strong sunlight shining directly into the lens. This effect is very practical and beautiful. The next effect, this one is a snow effect, and if we activate it, we can adjust the intensity of the snowfall with this slider, and also use this to control the speed of the falling snow. Let's preview it and see what happens. Alright, in our tour it's snowing now. Let me increase the snowfall speed. The snow looks a bit watery and falls quickly. Alright, let's go to the cap option. The cap is basically a cover that you place on the floor and ceiling of our panorama. As I mentioned, we can use this to hide the tripod or to place advertisements. You can even see that for tripods it says you can add a cap. You can choose one of these, or you can go to this section, insert an element or a photo, and use it. Just keep in mind that the element you insert must be square, meaning its width and height in pixels must be exactly the same, so it can be used as a cap. I'll select this 3D cap so its settings become active. Let me show you. With this option I can change its size, its dimensions. Okay, with this option I can change the position. Note that this cap is a type of compass. So with this position setting I can correctly choose the north-south direction. The VR distance is actually the distance that when we're looking with the virtual camera, determines how far the cap is placed in those cameras, and with this option we can increase or decrease that distance. Should the cursor change to a hand icon when the mouse hovers over it or not? By checking this option it becomes active, and by unchecking it, it becomes inactive. Fixed to panorama. Should it be fixed within the panorama, or should it actually be separate from the panorama? By enabling this, we can allow it to either be fixed within the panorama or be separate from it, and also have inertia. Meaning, when we rotate the panorama, should it have some inertia and rotate a bit more slowly or not? Alright? Let's preview it in this initial state, and then when we change the settings, you can see how it changes. So this is our cap. You can see that it has no inertia and is stuck to the panorama. Now I'm going to disable the fixed mode and add inertia to it. Let's see how it looks now. You can see that now it has inertia like this. Right. Let me also enable the fixed option to see how inertia behaves in this mode. As you can see, in this mode, the inertia effect is stronger. I can apply exactly the same thing to the ceiling as well. You see, I can apply this same cap to the ceiling as well. I can control its size and other settings. Apply your config. I can also apply this cap to the other panoramas. I can select them one by one and click done for each of them. These caps can be applied to the ceiling, the flare, or the floor. Also, for the floor, I need to click the apply config option here, and for the ceiling I need to click this config so it gets applied to all of them. Alright, the panorama section is finished and I've explained the features it offers. For you, dear viewers, God willing, in the next sections I will introduce and explain the other parts of the software to you and show you how you can work with it, so that in the end we can create a comprehensive and complete virtual tour using this software. But let's go ahead and export what we've created here so far. Let's publish it to see, for example, what kind of output this software gives us and how it publishes its files. Alright, we've done the settings up to this point. We won't make any more specific adjustments. In the same way, you want to publish the software and export from it. We go and select the publish option. We check this first section. I'll explain the other sections later. This first section must be checked so that the output is generated for the web. For now, we won't do anything with these other checkboxes. We even uncheck this first box so that only this first section remains checked, which actually creates an output compatible with Windows, Mac, and Android. All I need to do is select where I want this output to be saved. I create a new folder called publish and select this folder. I publish it so that my output is saved here. My virtual tour has been created. I go and open that folder. Notice that various files have been generated based on the settings we configured in the software and the inputs we provided. It created 3 folders and several files for us. As we move forward and make more settings in the software or design and configure more inputs, more files will be generated. The number of these outputs will also increase, and you see that, for example, if you design a shell or template, another folder will be added here as the template. If you go to the publish section and define something for the loading option, meaning that at the start of the tour another page will be shown with a different color and a different message that you design in this section, then another folder will also be created for loading, and so on. But what we've learned so far is that our output looks like this, and now we want to view this output just as we've created it. All we need to do is open 3D Vista Viewer. We open 3D Vista Viewer And all we need to do is drag our publish folder into the 3D Vista Viewer software so that our virtual tour is displayed. Of course, for this to work, our output needs to be in HTML format, which I explained in the previous video. If you have exported the output as a reference in the settings, this viewer will not be able to display it. Just like this, a perfect example of what we aim to achieve. Thank you all very much for your kind attention and for joining us today. Goodbye for now, and we hope to see you again soon.